And he says this, and it's a verse that we get often in connection with Elijah. It's one of the more famous ones, but this is what he tells them. So Elijah went before the people now, and he said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. How long will you waver? How long will you waver between two opinions? Elijah confronts a pretty complacent group of people. It's the people of Israel. They're willing to just kind of wait this out. Like, I don't really know. Maybe God's real. Maybe Baal is real. Maybe Asher is real. He wants them to commit to his side, but they don't. Israel is content to wait. They're content to wait. And we do this too. And this is different from, if you're here and you're just kind of exploring faith, or you're unsure about God, or you're wrestling through some doubts, or you've had some situations come up, you're like, I don't really know what all this is about, and you're kind of working through things. That's different. That's good. That's normal. That's great. We're glad that you're here. But this waiting, this wavering that's talked about here, it's literally a word that means it's for somebody like who's crippled and you're watching them kind of like hobble along. It's how long are you going to be crippled by trying to hold on to all of this? We cripple ourselves when we keep God just kind of as an option among all the options without ever being willing to go all in on something. We hold up God to our other gods, our gods of politics, our gods of success, our gods of religious activity, and we wait. We sit just like Israel and we wait. We wait between these two opinions. We kind of waver. We're like, I don't know if God's going to be better. Is he more real? Is he not? I don't know. And sometimes our defining moment for if we think like that God is better is like, if God doesn't come through in the way that I want him to come through, or if he doesn't resolve this issue in my timing, or if he doesn't work the way that I kind of want him to work things out in my life, or as I hope, then maybe God isn't worth it right now. And we drop him back into the bag with all of our other options, and maybe he's not real, or maybe he's just not really worth my time right now. So we drop him and we go back to waiting. And maybe there's a situation that necessitates picking him back up again, giving this another try, dusting it off and seeing if this is worth it, but we waver. We wait. And we're never really quite willing to step up, to step in, to go all in and legitimately give it a try to see what it looks like to be in relationship with God. We give him these one-off moments, and then we go back to waiting, saying, well, maybe. But unfortunately, it's not how God works. That's not who he is. There's a point in the Bible where Jesus literally says, I would rather that you outright hate me and stand by that than just be kind of lukewarm and wishy-washy about everything. This is Jesus who wants people to come to him and to be in relationship with him and to know him. He says, I would rather you either be devoted to me or just admit that you're not on board with this than just kind of do this weird little dance in the middle. It's what the people of Israel were doing, and if we're honest, that's sometimes what we do. I know it's something that I've done as I was trying to figure some things out. I just wanted to keep God as a cosmic backup plan instead of being willing to see what it would really look like to be in relationship with him. But Elijah says that's not going to cut it today. Today, you can't just sit there and hold on to God as a cosmic backup plan while you try to figure out if any of these other gods are worth it more. And today, maybe even is a day for us to maybe not hold God as that backup plan, but to really go all in, to step up like Elijah's doing here, to see what does it look like to trust and really go after God. And Elijah gets this. He didn't wait on God to do some big reveal to really show himself. Elijah's been walking with God, and he has stepped into situations and seen God come through. And so in this moment where God's like, hey, I need you to step up into this and help other people out, he says, yeah, we're going to do this. He doesn't try to bargain with these other gods. He doesn't try to bargain with these other prophets and be like, oh, maybe there's something that Asher has to say that I haven't heard before. He trusts God, and he's willing to commit to this. He's going to step up into what God gives him to do, and he's going to trust that God is going to come through. And so Elijah calls out the people of Israel. He's got the prophets all there at Mount Carmel. He's got the people there now watching, and they're just kind of like, we don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And he's like, you know what, forget you guys. We're going to do this. And so after this, Elijah says, you know what, it's time. We're going to set the stage for what is about to happen right here. And what happens is it feels like, it should be some sort of like mini HBO special or like some sort of fantasy movie, because what you get is like a pretty classic God's showdown. Elijah's like, we're going to set up 2 altars. There's going to be one right here for God. There's going to be one right here for your guys' God, for Baal. There's going to be 2 sacrifices on those altars. You can kind of see where this is going, right? Like, okay, whichever God burns up their sacrifice, that's the true God. And everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense. Sure, cool, let's do it. But I want to point out something really interesting. And so as Elijah is starting into this journey, he's like trying to tell the people what to do. He starts off his speech by making a very pointed statement. And it's found in verse 22 here in 1 Kings 18. He starts off with this very dramatic statement. He says, I'm the only one. I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. That's where Elijah's at right now. He feels pretty alone. And I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling, especially if we've tried to step into what God has called us to, or we've tried to honor him in those situations. Elijah says, like, I'm the only one left who's trying to do what's right, who's trying to do what's good. And I mean, he probably felt that way, right? He's looking around and he sees all these prophets over here who have abandoned God, and he sees a king who's abandoned God, and he looks at the people of Israel, and they aren't really making any choices either. And he says, I'm the only one. I'm the only one trying to do what's right here. But what makes this interesting is that that's not necessarily true. Because you see, before he was talking to this guy named Obadiah, right? And Obadiah was serving the Lord. And so Elijah's not alone. There's at least 2. But then Obadiah, in the course of his conversation with Elijah, he says this just a few verses earlier as he was trying to make his case for not dying today. He says, I've done some good things. I hid 100 prophets of the Lord in 2 caves. So there's Obadiah, and then there's at least 100 more people who are with Elijah still, who are doing the right thing, who are trying to take this stand. But it's hard. It's hard to see that. It's hard for Elijah when he's standing on that mountaintop and seeing so many people against him. It's hard to remember those kinds of things. And it brings us to, if you're following along your notes, this is kind of our first fill in the blank for the day. It's the fact that it's hard to see the big picture when we are in the big picture. Makes sense, right? It's hard to see the big picture when we are right in the middle of it. It's hard to see all the things that are being orchestrated and going on when you are right in the middle of the storm. So I want to just take this moment as a reminder for some of you, maybe as news to others of you. But like, if you're here this morning and you happen to be going through it, you know what that means. You know what it means to just be going through it sometimes. Like, if you're here and that's just where you're at, like, you are feeling that weight. You're like, I'm trying to stick it out in whatever situation it is, and I am just feeling alone. I am on that mountainside right there with Elijah saying, I'm the only one. I really want and hope that you would know that this is a place where you are not alone. Because everybody who's in here, everybody who's watching, we are all people who have been through it, who are going through it, who are working through things in our lives. We all have stories of struggle and triumph and moments where we're feeling alone. And so I really do hope that, if you're here and you don't know what's coming next, or you're trying to step into what God's calling you to and you don't really know what that looks like, or if you're here and you're like, I don't even know what following God really looks like, and in that I feel kind of alone, I want you to know you are not alone. This is a place for all of us to be and to belong. I really hope and pray you can find community here. We have so many different ways for you to be able to do that, to find people so that you can know in those moments where you're feeling alone that you're not. But you're not alone. Even if you're, not able to be here, if you're watching online, like in today's day and age, we've got that kind of digital community as well, where you guys aren't alone. We're all in this as a community together. I hope that the more that you hear, the more and more and more that you're able to find those people and connect with those people and realize that you're not necessarily alone. But we want to recognize that this is a pretty common thing to feel. It's hard to see the big picture when we're right in the middle of it. It's hard for Elijah to feel that way, right? It's so easy when you're caught up in moments to forget and to be able to recall and remember, no, I'm not alone. I've got people around me who love me, who care about me. If Elijah had slowed down for a moment, maybe he would have remembered that Obadiah was with him. Maybe he would have remembered that these other prophets were out there with him, but he is right in the middle of it. He is trying to do good things, but he feels it. And we do too. And so what happens next is kind of the fun part of this. So Elijah tells the prophets to go first. All these prophets of Baal, the prophets of Asherah, he's like, all right, y'all get to call on your God right now. Do whatever it is you got to do. And when evening comes, we'll see if this sacrifice gets burnt up. And so they go first, they prep their sacrifice, they start calling on their God, and nothing happens. And so now Elijah's starting to feel pretty good about himself. And so Elijah starts insulting their God, which, like, if you're talking to people and you're trying to make a point, please don't insult them to make your point. That's probably not a good way to go about doing things. Would not recommend that from the life of Elijah. Do not insult people, please. But Elijah, he's caught up in the moment. We can forgive him for that, right? And so he starts insulting their God. He starts saying things like, well, maybe your God had to go to the bathroom or something, or maybe your God is asleep and he went through his alarm, like literally things like that. It was kind of childish. But it was also like his best way to insult them, because in that day and age, it was super insulting to imply that gods had to do like normal human things. And so Elijah's like, maybe your God hit the snooze button too much. And we're like, Elijah, come on, man, that's not cool. That's kind of where he's at right now, right? And so he's insulting, Baal, this god of storms who can't cause lightning to come down from heaven and burn up this sacrifice. It's not a good look for him. They're really struggling because they don't know where their God is. And, this should have been right up his alley as a storm god, because a lot of people think that, when you call down fire from heaven, that was maybe most likely just lightning. And so for a storm god, it's like easy, but it's not. And so this is what the prophets of Baal continue to do. They shouted louder, and they slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, which is terrible to think about, that this is like what was normally required of them, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. And so Elijah insults them and their God, and their response is to try more and to try even harder, but there's no response. Nobody answers. No one pays attention. And it's crazy to think that that's what Baal required of them, because it says it was their custom to cut themselves in order to arouse and get their God to do what they wanted him to do. That's what he wanted, for them to exert themselves to a point of self-harm and physical anguish, to literally just give all of themselves for nothing, for no answer. And that's what happens when we choose to give ourselves to these other gods that we worship, other than the God. This is what gets demanded of us, too. There's no guarantee that these other things that we're worshiping are going to come through. And so when we're out chasing these other gods, these gods of politics, these gods of religious activity, these gods of wealth and status, of social justice, of pleasure, of freedom, when we chase all of these other things, we end up putting everything on the line in pursuit of them. Our own jobs, our mental health, our sanity, our families, our finances, our peace, our joy, as we're trying to appease and pour everything into these other gods. And then in the moment where we finally think, I can lean back on this and it's going to support me and it's going to give me that fulfillment that I need, they don't show up. There's no response. Nobody answers. Seems like they weren't even paying attention to begin with. And it's because when our gods don't show up, when the things that we give our time and our energy and our effort and our attention to other than the God, when they don't show up, we get messed up as a result. And our families get messed up as a result, and our inner lives get all out of whack as a result. And if you're following along, this is our next fill in the blank here. When our gods don't show up, we get messed up as a result. Putting everything that we've got into the God of politics isn't going to save us. Putting everything that we've got into the God of doing lots and lots of just good things in my life to even out the scales, it's not actually going to give us that deep fulfillment that we're really looking for. Putting everything that I've got into, I can do whatever I want and nobody can tell me otherwise as long as I'm okay and happy. I might be happy for a little bit, but ultimately, I'm not going to have joy. I'm not going to have long-lasting peace. We give and we give and we give to these things, and they don't give back. Nobody answers. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody listens.